I'm talking with Nicholas McGegan,
McGegan, yeah.
Who's conducting the Columbus Symphony this weekend in 3 concerts at the Southern Theater. Friday tonight, March 2nd, and Saturday night and Sunday afternoon, March 4th at 3 p.m. I notice you tell a lot of humorous anecdotes.
I'm British.
Yes, yes. But you seem to have a really good sense of the history of so the occasion that these pieces were written and the stories behind when they were written. And I'm wondering how that informs, your musical interpretation and playing these pieces.
Well, I feel that we're dealing with not just music, but wonderful people who wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of Haydn, an absolutely adorable person that I would have loved to have met. Mm-hmm. Mozart too, of course. J.C. Bach was incredibly nice. Rameau was not, apparently. It was said he was only kind to anyone by mistake. He was mean. But nevertheless, they all were wonderful people. They lived, they loved, and they wrote terrific music. So it's always interesting for me to know more about them. In the case of 3 of these pieces, they even have a British connection, because J.C. Bach was the youngest son of Johann Sebastian. He lived in London, mm-hmm. and lived and died in London. Was mostly very successful until his housekeeper stole all his money. And when in 1765 the 9-year-old Mozart came to London, it was John Christian Bach who entertained him best, and they made music together. And you can hear in this J.C. Bach concerto that it's his language, musical language, that Mozart adopted mm-hmm. and developed.
Interesting.
It's very much
that. I often just think of him as sort of the less successful son of Bach.
He was very successful in London, very successful as an opera composer. Mm-hmm. He did absolutely everything that his father would have found horrifying. He was a Roman Catholic. Uh-huh. He didn't have any children, and he wrote opera. Wow. All the things his father would have thought really weird.
But did well with them.
Did really well until his last years. And a person wrote about him that he was too great to know the littleness of envy. He was apparently just one of the nicest people on the planet.
Wow.
And a great practical joker and terrific guy. Mozart, of course, was a great practical joker, as we know. We're doing this ballet music from Idomeneo, which is unusual to do Mozart ballet music. There isn't very much of it. And this is from an opera, the first mature opera, if you want. Mm-hmm. He was the ripe age of 21 or something, but mm-hmm. it's a terrific, serious opera about basically it's a sort of Abraham and Isaac or Jephthah story of a father having to sacrifice his son. It doesn't happen, of course, because operas end happily in those days, and of course it ends with ballet, so it's wonderful to have a nice ballet at the end. The Haydn piece is one of his very last pieces, and again he wrote that in London for performance at the King's Theatre. He had a huge orchestra of 60 people. Wow. The clarinetists had to come from the local military band, because they weren't any in London at the time. They must have been pretty good, because it occasionally gives them tunes, not as much as Mozart does, but wonderful, wonderful music. A guy at the top of his game. He was at this point, he was happily in love with a lady 20 years his junior who had a lot of money. So I think he was in an extraordinarily good mood almost the whole time, and you can certainly tell that from this music. It's just wonderful. He was 63 or so when he wrote it.
Wow.
And
he lived a long life.
Yeah, he's 62 or 3, so I'm just turned 62, so I feel a very sort of nice link with this piece right now. I think it's a marvellous piece.
And of course the clarinets were just being introduced to the orchestra at this period in history, because they were invented fairly recently before this. Do you have any sort of, well, you told one story that the clarinets for the Haydn piece had to be imported from the local band.
In Vienna,
they weren't standard in the orchestra.
In Vienna there was Anton Stadler, who was a terrific clarinet player,
for
whom Mozart wrote. And Mozart adored the clarinet, but it's mostly because friends of his really developed the instrument as a solo instrument, a chamber instrument, and then of course played in orchestras. In London there wasn't that tradition of great clarinet playing. Wind players tended to be a bit like jazz wind players. Flute players played the oboe players played the flute, and they both flute players and oboists had a go at the clarinet. It was much more like a jazz band. And only a bit later do you get specialists. Johann Fischer, for example, who played the oboe part in the J.C. Bach, was an oboist. He just played the oboe. But very often, even in Mozart, you'll find that oboes play in the outside movements of symphonies and the flutes play in the middle movement. Doesn't mean they were separate players, they just doubled. And that was considered the norm. You rented a wind player. They were expected to play everything. Sax, clarinet, flute, whatever it happened to be. And that kept going really till almost the beginning of the 19th century,
Yeah.
when the parts just got too hard
Yeah.
for people to. Though there are still some people who do double.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I was doing Creation right recently, where the third flute part was played by the first clarinetist.
The Haydn?
The Haydn.
The Haydn
They
Creation,
happened
yeah.
to play the flute.
Interesting.
So that's kind of a nice doubling to do.
Wonderful.
So it's lovely. This is all music from, well, the Ramo is the earliest piece from the 1730s up, then the J.C. Bach is from the 1760s. The Mozart is next, early 1780s, and then 1794-5 for the Haydn. So we're covering about 60 years of music. As I say, the British connection plus a little bit of French ballet. Two ballets, Haydn, Ramo and Mozart, and a symphony and a Sinfonia Concertante, and no outside soloists. Isn't that terrific? They
Right,
come
all
from
soloists from within the orchestra.
Within the orchestra,
Yes.
so it's a terrific thing to do.
Yeah, well, it's a delightful program, and we were looking forward to playing it.
Me too,
so.
and what a wonderful place this is too.
Yes, the Southern Theatre.
We never have enough gold for me, it's terrific.
And it's nice acoustics,
It's
doesn't
perfect,
it?
it's absolutely perfect for this
for
music.
Yeah.
It's the perfect size and great on stage, looks terrific and sounds great.
I wanted to say I went out and listened and watched during the pieces I wasn't playing, and it was really fun to watch you conduct. You really conduct the gestures that you want in the music so clearly. Often you'll see conductors will just give the beat and then we'll discuss the gestures and style. And I was amazed at how quickly the orchestra sounded sort of like an authentic, Enlightenment age orchestra.
They're a very good orchestra, that's why.
Yeah,
but it's also, in this music, so long as people can play together, which they do, this is not in 5/8 going to 7/8 going to 3/16 or something, so I don't have to cut the sushi quite the same way as,
Cut the sushi out.
as other people do.
Yeah. But
There's
you really
often a click track in this stuff, so it's more giving the gestures. A lot of it's written in the parts already, of course, but it means it. If I do my work in advance, the orchestra should just be able to come in and just play.
Yeah.
And that's the idea, and then we can have fun,
Well, that's what we're hoping to do tonight.
We certainly are. Looking forward to it
Thank
very
you.
much.
Good to talk to you.
Thank you. Thanks.